Music, singing, and dancing are common to most floor shows, but in this one, people are playing supportive roles to cars. This is a new car preview, Detroit style. Ford Motor Company's Lincoln Mercury division created the extravaganza in Detroit's Cobo Arena as part of the formal unveiling of its new line of 79 models. The spectacular production mixed unique choreography with some deft on-stage driving. Automotive reporters from around the country were wooed to Detroit for this event in a move by Ford to generate nationwide publicity for its new product line. Some of the models have not changed, like the Lincoln and Continental Mark V, which entered 1979 as the last two large production cars made in America. But the big news, as far as automotive reporters were concerned, was a totally new Mercury Capri, which shares basic design with Ford's new Mustang, and a completely redesigned Mercury Marquis, which shares its downsized body with Ford's LTD.
It was colorful and it was entertaining, but this National Ford Press Preview was more than just a show, more than just cars to look at. Here at the Ford Motor Company Proving Ground in Dearborn, reporters were given a chance to ride and drive the 79 Lincoln Mercury products.
Ford Motor's biggest capital investment this year was in the downsizing of its large Mercurys and Fords. The Marquis for 79 is 17 inches shorter than its 78 counterpart and 800 pounds lighter, all in the interest of better fuel efficiency. If all this sounds familiar, it should. General Motors has already downsized most of its large cars.
It almost seems that you're playing catch-up with General Motors. They did this a couple of years ago. Is this the case?
No, I don't think it's catch-up. They have their product cycles and their product plans. We have ours. We did not downsize the Marquis until 1979. However, we did sell every Marquis that this company could build in this 1978 model year.
So you don't think it was a mistake in any way to wait these 2 years to downsize the Mercury and to keep the Lincoln big?
Not at all. I think it was good product planning on the company's part, and I think we paced ourselves just right.
The unveiling of a new car is the culmination of years of planning. I recently spent a week in the Detroit area, along with photographers Randy Levine and Al Sunshine, getting a first-hand look not only at how automobiles are put together, but at how they are styled and tested. In an upcoming week-long series beginning in October, you will see why automakers are building plastic models of their cars at $100,000 a crack. We'll show how 5 years of rust can be created on a car in 4 months. And while most thoughts now are on the 79 models, we will show you exclusive shots of 1980 cars, like this front-wheel drive 1980 Pontiac Phoenix. Bob Mayer, Channel 4 News, Detroit.
Chances are your shiny new car was produced in a place like this. This is Ford's Rouge Assembly Plant in Dearborn, Michigan, one of 21 Ford assembly plants in this country.
The sheer size of a plant like this is overwhelming, especially to a Miami native who has seen very little industry. There are 1,200 acres of auto production facilities here. In fact, this is the only plant on the North American continent where nearly the entire auto production procedure is accomplished in the same location. Ford even produces much of its own steel at the Rouge plant, 3 million tons of steel bars a year. Today, the plant makes 1979 Ford Mustangs and Mercury Capris, but history long ago made its mark at the Rouge plant, which built Henry Ford's revolutionary Model T. The assembly line now moves at the rate of 68 cars an hour, 16 hours a day. In 2 work shifts, the plant produces nearly 1,100 cars. The 79 Mustang and Capri are totally different from their 78 counterparts, new from the ground up. And there were some predictable problems because of that, simply because line workers weren't familiar with the car.
We start off the car much slower than what we would be doing with a model that's carryover from one year to the next. In other words, the first day of our production, we were producing somewhere around 10 to 12 jobs an hour coming off the end of our final line and going through all the other systems. And each day, we add a little bit to that until we accomplish our full line speed, which is 68 jobs per hour.
Once the bugs are ironed out, the work becomes quite routine, even monotonous by most standards. The line never stops. Workers perform their individual tasks in a matter of moments while the car is moving. Dozens of sub-assembly lines all seem to get to the right place at the right time, matching the proper options and parts to specific cars. It's all done by computer, along with readout sheets, which are part of what is called a broadcast system. Ford says the concept is extremely simple.
The coating itself is so developed so that an item that's going to be applied to a car always appears in a certain block, and then all we have to do is train an operator to read into that particular block, and he says, okay, if I read this numeric number and that particular point, it's a red car, or this numeric number, it's a green car or a blue car or whatever, and he picks that particular item and applies it to the car.
Ford, of course, says it aims to produce cars with no defects, a worthy goal perhaps, but one nearly impossible to attain. Tomorrow night, we'll look at quality control in the assembly plant, at why defects do occur, and at how Ford tries to repair the problem cars before they leave the factory. Bob Mayer, Channel 4 News at Ford's Rouge Assembly Plant in Dearborn, Michigan. Practically everyone who buys a new car finds something wrong with it. That discovery is often followed by the hassle of taking it to a dealer and having it fixed, a process which may have to be repeated a half-dozen times. Most defects are built into a car here at the assembly plant, and despite popular opinion, car makers are spending a lot of time and money trying to find problem cars before they ever leave the factory. Here at its Rouge Assembly Plant in Dearborn, Michigan, Ford Motor Company uses what is called the control point system to find defects. Inspectors at each control point check on the work which has been done on the car since the previous point. Whenever possible, the cars are repaired online. In the body shop, for example, inspectors feel for imperfections or dings in sheet metal. When found, they are hammered or ground out before the car is primed for painting. Wherever there are humans, there is error, of course, but the biggest enemy of quality on the assembly line is absenteeism. There are 2,600 production workers at Rouge, and on any given day, as many as 260 can be out sick.
When the regular trained operator isn't there to perform his job, it's necessary, therefore, to then take someone else and put him in that position. And then with that line moving at its normal speed, here's an operator who's brand new on the job, and he has to get trained to do that job along with all the other operators in that particular area that are performing their everyday task. Naturally, he's going to be a little bit slower than the guy who's trained, and naturally, there are going to be some elements of the job that may get away from him.
Absenteeism is worse on Mondays and Fridays, but Ford says the story about Monday or Friday produced cars being inferior doesn't hold water.
When the car finally leaves the plant, I'd say there's no truth to it at all. Every car goes through the same amount of inspection and the same amount of checking all the way through. We feel that our cars, when they leave here on a Monday or a Friday, they're just as good as any car that leaves here on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday.
Are there more defects, though, on Mondays and Fridays?
Oh, I'd say yes.
Some of what is wrong with cars today is a matter of opinion. As we've pointed out in our behind-the-wheel car reports over the last 5 years, the quality of paint jobs has declined. I don't know the reason for sure, but a good guess would be simply the speed of the line. It's all done very quickly. And yes, cars do get nicked and dinged on the assembly line. There's no magic in their repair, just a brush and some old-fashioned touch-up paint.
If there is a point at which this plant gives birth to a car, this is it, near the end of the final assembly line. Every car that reaches this point has its engine started for the very first time. Incidentally, in case you're wondering, Ford says only 1% of the cars that reach this point won't start. Bob Mayer, Channel 4 News at Ford's Rouge Assembly Plant in Dearborn, Michigan.
Located 40 miles northwest of downtown Detroit, the General Motors Milford Proving Ground is the heart of the company's durability and safety testing program. Secrecy is no joke here, and security is tight, mainly because much of what's being tested are cars with bodies and components of future vehicles. It's a massive complex, more than 4,000 acres in all, inlaid with more than 130 miles of test roads, ranging from the best in the country to the worst. Safety crash tests are an integral part of the Proving Ground's work, both with actual cars and with partial mock-ups. For durability testing, cars here are run continuously on GM's network of roadways. But for emission purposes and to prepare vehicles for EPA certification, GM employs what are called programmed mileage dynamometers. Operated by remote-control tape decks from a sophisticated control tower, these vehicles, most of them with 1980 engines, will accumulate 50,000 miles of simulated city driving in just 2.5 months. This full-scale 1980 Pontiac Phoenix with front-wheel drive had well over 40,000 miles on it. Did you ever wonder what would happen if your car veered off into a concrete expressway median like this? Tests of this GM design, now used throughout the country, indicate nothing. Doc Whitworth of GM's engineering staff does a lot more with test cars than hit expressway medians.
Basically, I'm going to do a 40180, Bob. It gives us an opportunity to test and really load the suspension system up and see what we can put into it. Something like this. Then we'll go into a reverse 180, and a reverse 180 is simply the same type of thing, loading the suspension system up, giving a maximum effort in that. Then we'll go into a little G-turn here, full throttle, lock steering, loading the one wheel up, just sitting here running in a tight corner. We usually run this at 55 mile an hour, and then we'd go on and do some other part of the test.
The wide variety of tests performed here are designed, among other things, to age a car rapidly. Water and saltwater soaking play a large role in that area.
Nearly everyone in South Florida has automotive rust problems, but under normal conditions, rust can take years to develop. So, in addition to saltwater splash tests, General Motors puts its cars in corrosion chambers like this one, where the temperature is 100 degrees and the relative humidity is 100%. 5 years of rust can be created here in 4 months.
Of course, the rust problem is far from solved, and this test shows what a 1979 GM vehicle could look like in 1984. One of the most exciting aspects of the Proving Ground area is what you see on the track.
We're looking at cars well into the future. Right now we're running 79 cars, 80 cars, cars with components on them that represent 1981, 82 cars. The result would be that if the testing shows the product to be inadequate on this test, then it's probably inadequate for the customer. So immediate changes are made to the product such that it will perform on this durability test.
Tomorrow night, we'll take a look at design testing with a visit to the Chrysler Corporation Engineering and Design Center. Bob Mayer, Channel 4 News, Detroit. Few of us are aware that computers now play a major role in the design and testing of automobiles. Here at the Chrysler Engineering and Design Center in Highland Park, Michigan, where a rigid time schedule must be met to prepare and launch new vehicles, designers can actually digitize the surface of a vehicle on a computer screen. Interiors are then designed through computer graphics, but most importantly, according to Chrysler's Larry Sugg, the computer is used to test the car's structure, to put loads on its components, and to check for failure.
What we're seeing on the screen is a Dodge Omni that's going through vibration analysis, and the terminal allows us to look at that vibration analysis from any angle in space. We can rotate that vehicle in 3 dimensions and view it. We can change the size of any part of it. We can zoom in on particular components of that vehicle.
The suspension, the wheels going up and down here?
Suspension part of the system as well as the engine, yes.
And what will you find out through this kind of testing?
From this analysis, we'll find out the frequencies that cause noise in a car or cause vibration in a car that's undesirable. From those frequencies, then, we can change the vehicle and enhance the design to remove undesirable road characteristics.
While the computer is perhaps the most important tool in auto engineering today, the Structure Analysis Lab is not far behind. This is Chrysler Corporation's toy shop. Exact 3/8 scale plastic models are built here well before a car is ready for production. Journeyman model builders, working from artist drawings, first construct a wooden mold of the car and its parts. Heated plastic is draped over the wood dies, and when complete, the plastic is perfectly scaled in length, width, and material thickness. Detail as fine as spot welds are built into the model because exactness is vital. Chrysler built the first plastic scale models in 1955 for testing purposes.
We can find out how much the vehicle will deflect under a given load. We can find out how much stress it is being subjected to.
How can you do that with plastic that's so pliable?
Well, the plastic has a ratio to that of steel. The stiffness of the plastic has a definite ratio, a known ratio to steel. And by applying scale loads to this plastic model, we can make it behave exactly the way the full-size steel prototype or production vehicle will behave.
What's it cost to put one of these models together?
A complete body model will probably cost $100,000 to build.
$100,000 may seem expensive for a plastic model, but the alternative is to build a $500,000 full-scale steel prototype. For an early design that might not ever be produced, that could be an unnecessary and costly expenditure. Bob Mayer, Channel 4 News at the Chrysler Engineering and Design Center in Highland Park, Michigan.
Design testing on computers and plastic models is fine, but so far nothing has been able to take the place of actual hands-on structural and reliability analysis. Amidst the din of groaning electric motors which can simulate real-life load conditions in the lab, virtually every vehicular part undergoes stress tests, from the smallest fastener to the largest truck frame, to find the point past which the part will fail. Components are put through cycles designed to simulate a lifetime of customer use. If a failure occurs too early, immediate changes are made.
We redesign the part. We make it out of a different material. Like in a door, if it fails, we might increase the thickness. We may make it out of different material so that we increase the life of that material.
The Reliability Testing Lab does an incredible amount of work. Here at Ford, nearly 1,000 persons test more than 150,000 automotive components a year.
A lot of what's being tested here is unrecognizable to the average person, parts we never see. Others are in their skeletal state, but still identifiable. This test simulates the kind of pressure a steering wheel is subjected to. Here, a transmission gear shift lever is moved mechanically from one end of its spectrum to the other, upwards of 500,000 times. Ford wants this lever and other parts to eventually break.
If you run a component for 1 million cycles and it doesn't have a crack in it, you don't know if the next cycle is not going to fail it. So we generally run it till we get the highest load, which will cause some kind of a failure. But that's an internal standard that we use to make sure it's not going to fail in the field.
Most people have no idea what kind of abuse a vehicle is subjected to during rail transport. This simulator is running from a computer tape duplicating bed conditions on a trip from New Jersey to Miami along the East Coast. If a new car can't take this, the manufacturer has to know long before the car goes into full production. Ford, Chrysler, and General Motors. Styling, production, and testing. We've seen them all this week, behind the wheel in Detroit. Bob Mayer, Channel 4 News, Detroit.
American Motors is now out of the big car business, having dropped its full-sized Matador. And with AMC's emphasis now totally on small cars for 1979, comes the introduction of an all-new car, the Spirit Liftback.
While the Spirit sedan strongly resembles the old AMC Gremlin, the liftback model sports fresh styling all around. Base price of the liftback is $44.30, including freight. Our nicely equipped test car listed at $64.21. Exterior workmanship on our Spirit was good, and the car boasts a paint stripe, not the usual tape. The overall paint job was on the dull side, but because of what we've become used to from Detroit, I'll rate it average. The interior of the subcompact Spirit is far more luxurious than anything in its class. Corduroy bucket seats are standard, and with a couple of exceptions, the interior was put together nicely. An optional gauge package added a nice touch, but the clock lost nearly 30 minutes in 1 week, and the fuel and temperature gauges were jammed for most of that time. Simulated wood looked very good, and Spirit's AM/FM stereo was excellent.
Rear seat room on the Spirit Liftback is not good. I'm only 5'5½", and I'm uncomfortable. Practically no leg room, and there is no headroom. If I sit up, my head touches the roof.
As for luggage space, 3 pieces of our 4-piece test luggage set fit in with the rear seats up. The 4th mated only with the rear seats down. The optional 258 6-cylinder engine in the Spirit performed quite well. Instant cold starts, lots of power, and no hesitation or stalling. Spirit does not ride as smoothly as the AMC Concorde, although its suspension is soft. The car was insulated well from outside noises, but various road conditions produced 1 or 2 rattles and an intermittent but annoying squeak. As for handling, I found the Spirit's steering to be a bit loose, but the car was nimble nevertheless, mainly because of its size. It accepted hard turns and hard braking without complaint.
The most disappointing aspect of this Spirit was the mileage. EPA rated at 17. I got only 13.8 miles per gallon in city driving with the air conditioning on. That's the kind of mileage you'd expect from a bigger car with a V8 engine. Now, that's our look at the AMC Spirit. Next week on Behind the Wheel, the totally new Ford Mustang. One of the most exciting cars to come off Ford's assembly lines in years is the totally redesigned Mustang.
New from the ground up, the 79 Mustang is 4 inches longer than its 78 counterpart, but 200 pounds lighter. Styling is rakish, obviously patterned after the Mercedes-Benz Coupe. Base price, including freight, of a standard Mustang is $43.35. Our nicely equipped Ghia model listed at $71.84. Paint jobs on Mustangs are about like most other cars. Ours was quite grainy in some areas and gets a rating of fair. The level of interior luxury in the Mustang Ghia is quite high, and the car has some fancy features like a digital quartz clock and a bank of lights to warn of everything from low fuel to a burned-out head or tail light. Somewhere along the line, factory workers were a bit sloppy in putting the dash together on this Mustang, and the quality control people failed to catch an ill-fitting carpet. The Ford stereo was excellent. Mustang's trunk took 2 pieces of our luggage set. The other 2 just didn't make it. The 302 V8 in our Mustang had all the power anyone could possibly want and is one of 4 engine options being offered. Our test car did stall after cold starts and hesitated on acceleration, but otherwise performance buffs would be happy. The new Mustang excels in handling, too, and signals a return to the kind of responsiveness offered in the hot cars of the mid-60s. But while the ride is firm, like most sport-type cars, I found the car itself to be loose, more rattles, squeaks, and groans, at least in this particular car, than in any new car I've driven. No telling how many things were not tightened properly when the car was made. There were a couple of other minor things, like a cruise control that rarely worked, but the most serious problem with our test car was a faulty electrical system. A short somewhere in the car's wiring caused the whole system to die repeatedly, especially in the rain. Lights would dim to practically nothing, the radio and air conditioning would fade out, and the digital clock would revert to zeros. Mustang's fuel tank holds only 11.5 gallons. With a V8 engine and the AC on, I averaged only 11.4 miles per gallon in city traffic, meaning a driving range of just 130 miles. I would recommend one of the smaller engines. And that's our look at the Ford Mustang. Next week, the new, smaller Cadillac Eldorado. With the introduction of the 1979 Cadillac Eldorado, General Motors has completed the downsizing of its large cars. The new Eldorado is 1,100 pounds lighter than its 78 counterpart and nearly 2 feet shorter. The car bears practically no resemblance to its predecessors, although it does look strikingly like its sister cars for 79, the Buick Riviera and the Olds Toronado. Squared-off styling, highlighted by a Seville-inspired roofline, marked the new Eldorado. Our test car had some of the finest workmanship we've seen on an American car. Even the paint job was nearly flawless and gets a rating of excellent. Usable trunk space is improved over last year, and all of our luggage fit in. Although the 79 model seats only 4 persons, GM has increased the other interior dimensions of the Eldorado, including head and leg room. With the sole exception of loose threads on the rear seat pouches, craftsmanship on the Eldorado's interior was also outstanding. And while the car might be downsized, the luxury certainly isn't. If you crave an option, this car probably offers it. Some of the more extravagant features of this Eldorado are electrically operated outside rear-view mirrors and power door locks that automatically secure the vehicle when the transmission is put in drive. And drive this car does. In fact, this is where General Motors has worked its real magic with the Eldorado. While it is no longer a big car by any standards, it rides like a big car. The 79 Eldorado is one of the smoothest, quietest cars I've ever driven. The passenger compartment was practically noise-free. Eldorado's fuel-injected 350 V8 was extremely responsive, and while it did hesitate slightly on light acceleration, its general operation was silky smooth.
Eldorado has always had front-wheel drive, but the car was never known for its maneuverability, mainly because it was so big. The 79 model is extremely nimble, both because of engineering advancements and its new small size. Base price of a Cadillac Eldorado is $14,699. Our test car listed at $17,055. And while that is a sizable price tag, I believe this car represents the finest combination of big car ride and small car handling I've ever experienced. EP8 at 14, our test car delivered 11 miles per gallon in city traffic with the air conditioning on. And that's our look at the Cadillac Eldorado. Next week, the new, smaller Ford LTD. The end of the big American car is virtually here. General Motors started the downsizing revolution 2 years ago with its big cars, and for '79, Ford has performed the inevitable surgery on its big Mercurys and LTDs. In fact, the '79 LTD is shorter and lighter by several hundred pounds than the less expensive LTD II, which has not yet been downsized. Base price of the LTD is $63.65, including freight. Our fully equipped Landau test car listed at $99.44. The LTD has an extremely large trunk, larger than last year. All our luggage fit in with room to spare. Overall, we found exterior workmanship on this Ford to be good. We rated the paint job as average, not good, but like most cars are today. In downsizing the LTD, Ford went GM one better. In addition to increasing head and leg room, as GM did, Ford also managed to increase hip and shoulder room. The optional $700 luxury interior in this car was put together nicely. We would rate workmanship good. The only defect was a broken manual door lock. The power lock worked. Our LTD had an excellent sound system and a unique 3-function digital clock. The standard 302 V8 in our LTD Landau performed well, but although its power was adequate, it wasn't gutsy. A larger 351 V8 is also available. There were a few minor rattles in our test car, but the ride of the LTD remains basically solid and quiet. Nevertheless, the car does have a lighter feel. Under most conditions, the downsized LTD is easier to maneuver because of its new size. However, a steering problem surfaced on our test track. When urgent and repeated turns of the wheel were required, the power steering stiffened. The faster I tried to turn the wheel, the more difficult it became. This may have been a problem confined solely to our test car, but it was there. As for mileage, the car is EP8 at 15. I got 12.2 miles per gallon in city traffic with the air conditioning on. And that's our look at the Ford LTD. Next week, the redesigned, smaller Chrysler New Yorker. Chrysler Corporation has just introduced a totally new version of its luxury car, the New Yorker. The '79 New Yorker is a flashy but smaller version of its '78 counterpart, having lost more than 900 pounds and 9.5 inches in length. Nevertheless, there are some big improvements in this car. This year's standard engine, the 360 V8, provided more power and better mileage than last year's standard 400. In a combination of 2/3 city and 1/3 expressway driving, the New Yorker delivered 12.3 miles per gallon with the air conditioner on. Our test car did develop several problems. After we performed the mileage test, the air conditioner stopped working. An electrical malfunction caused the brake lights to fail, and whenever the brakes were applied, the digital quartz clock went out, losing the correct time. In addition, stepping on the brake caused an interior light to go on and off. As for paint, I would rate it good overall, although there were several defects, including a bad run on one rear door. Incidentally, both front doors stuck intermittently. For '79, Chrysler has introduced several new sounding alarms. This one for leaving your lights on, this one for failing to take your key out of the ignition, and this one for not fastening your safety belt. Our test car was the New Yorker 5th Avenue edition. A sumptuous leather interior was well appointed and generally well put together with more roominess than last year's bigger model. The car had an excellent sound system, but the emergency flasher button would not stay engaged. And the left rear door was not properly sealed, resulting in a bad water leak that wet the rear carpet. New Yorker's trunk space is down very slightly from last year, but still easily accommodated our test luggage set.
The New Yorker's ride has been significantly improved over last year with a firmer suspension. The car takes bumps very well, and although there was an irritating wind noise in our test car, there were no rattles. As could be expected, the smaller New Yorker also handles better than last year's model with a feel similar to the Cordoba. Base price of a Chrysler New Yorker is $90.96 including freight. Our Fifth Avenue edition with its options totaled $12,625. Next week, the Olds 98 diesel.